The rain hadn't let up since dawn. It came down in soft sheets, blurring the city like a half-finished painting. Downtown Portland moved slower on mornings like this. Cars hissed through puddles. Umbrellas bobbed like dark mushrooms, and coffee shops became tiny sanctuaries. James Carter stepped into one of them, shaking water from his worn jacket, Lily's bright pink umbrella folded tightly in one hand. His other hand clutched his work satchel, grease-stained and heavy with tools. The warmth hit him first, then the smell roasted beans, cinnamon, and something sweet he couldn't name. It was familiar, comforting. This shop had become his 10-minute break from chaos. He didn't come for conversation or luxury, just a small black coffee and a moment to breathe before heading off to the garage. Working two jobs didn't leave much time for rest, but here, in this little corner of the world, he found silence. He stepped up to the counter, nodding at the barista, a young man who already knew his order. "One small black," James said, reaching into his pocket for the crumpled bills he kept just for this. That's when he saw her. She was seated by the fogged window, curled slightly forward, like she was trying to disappear into the shadows. Her coat was sleek, expensive, cream-colored against the gray backdrop of the day. But it wasn't the coat that caught him. It was the way her shoulders trembled, the way one hand clutched a tissue too tightly, and the coffee cup in front of her, untouched, its steam long faded. James paused. Something about her posture, the way she kept her face hidden, like she didn't want the world to see her fall apart, hit him. He didn't know her story. Maybe she didn't want anyone to know. But she was crying, and it didn't matter how fancy her coat was. He leaned closer to the counter. "Add a caramel latte," he said quietly, nodding in her direction. The barista followed his gaze, then looked back at him. "On the house, man," he said with a small smile. Sweet gesture. James nodded once, took the drinks, and crossed the floor with slow steps. He didn't want to startle her, didn't want to intrude, but something in his chest told him he couldn't just walk away. He stopped beside her table and placed the latte gently down. "Excuse me, miss," he said, voice low but kind. "Figured everyone deserves a warm cup on a day like this. Hope it helps a little." She looked up, startled. Her eyes were rimmed red, and mascara had smudged just beneath her lashes. But she was beautiful in a quiet, broken way. Her lips parted like she wanted to say something, but wasn't sure what. Then, softly, she said, "Thank you. That's really kind." James gave her a nod. "No problem. I've had those days, too." He didn't wait for more, just turned and walked out the door, stepping back into the rain without opening the umbrella. There was still a bus to catch, still Lily to drop off at school, still another long day ahead. But as he walked, his coffee warming his hand, he felt something shift. Small, maybe, but real. He hadn't changed the world, but maybe he'd changed her morning. And somehow, that felt like enough. The garage smelled like old oil, wet metal, and rain. James wiped the back of his hand across his forehead, smearing sweat with a streak of engine grease. Under the lifted SUV, the world narrowed to bolts, gears, and the hum of hydraulic lifts. The radio buzzed faintly in the background, competing with the downpour outside. It was just another Wednesday. Until his phone rang. It buzzed against the tool cart, the screen glowing with an unfamiliar number. James didn't get many calls, especially not during work. He almost ignored it, but something, maybe the softness of the voice he'd heard that morning, or the quiet pain behind those eyes, nudged him to answer. He stepped outside into the rain, ducking beneath the shop's overhang. "Hello," he said, his voice low and cautious. "Mr. Carter." The voice on the other end was smooth, refined, cultured in a way that didn't belong in a mechanic's life. "This is Evelyn Royce. We met this morning. I was the woman, the crying one." He blinked, caught between disbelief and confusion. "You ain't right. Hi. I didn't get a chance to thank you properly," she said. Her tone was different now, steady, measured, like the trembling had been tucked away behind locked doors. "I was wondering if you'd meet me for lunch tomorrow, my treat." He hesitated. "I'm flattered, really, but I can't afford to take time off work." "I'll compensate you for the missed hours," she said quickly, "and double them." James looked out at the rain, thinking, It had been a long time since anyone offered him anything. Without a catch, he couldn't shake the image of her sitting in that cafe, fragile but fighting not to fall apart. "All right," he said finally. "1 hour, that's all I can give. It's all I ask," she said. "I'll text you the address." When he hung up, he stared at the screen for a long moment. Evelyn Royce. The name meant nothing to him, not yet. Just a stranger whose coffee he'd bought. But deep down, something didn't add up. Designer coat, private number, confidence. Layered over earlier sorrow, this woman wasn't just anyone. The next day, James borrowed a clean shirt and took a later shift at the garage. He felt out of place just entering the building she'd named a tall glass structure. Overlooking the river, all marble and silent elevators, the rooftop restaurant was quiet. Too quiet, like it didn't belong to the same noisy world he lived in. Evelyn was already there. She stood as he approached. No tears, no shaking hands. She wore a slate gray blazer and diamond earrings so subtle they whispered wealth. Instead of shouting it, her smile was soft but guarded, and her eyes, still red-rimmed beneath the makeup, but holding something sharper. "Now, purpose. Thank you for coming," she said, extending a hand. "I hope you don't mind sparkling water. I've already ordered." James took the seat opposite her, unsure whether to laugh or run. "You look different." "I am different," she said quietly. "Yesterday I was drowning. Today, I'm standing." They ordered salad for her, burger for him. He didn't pretend to fit in. He didn't know which fork to use, but she didn't seem to care. As the food arrived, she leaned in, lowering her voice. "You probably don't know who I am, and that's part of why I'm here." James raised an eyebrow. "Should I? Most people do," she said. "But most people wouldn't have bought me coffee without knowing. You look like you needed it." He replied. That was enough. For the first time, her smile reached her eyes. "I run several companies," she said. "Real estate, pharmaceuticals, tech investments. My face is on the cover of Forbes' Northwest issue. My calendar is booked 3 months out. And I was one bad decision away from burning it all down." He said nothing, not yet. He let her speak. "My CFO, someone I trusted for 12 years, embezzled nearly $80 million from my accounts, personal and corporate. I found out 2 hours before I walked into that coffee shop. It wasn't just betrayal. It was heartbreak." James looked down at his plate. "And all I did was buy you a drink." "No," she said firmly. "You saw me, not the money, not the reputation, just a human being." She reached into her bag and slid a manila envelope across the table. James stared at it, unsure whether to touch it. "What's this?" he asked. "A job offer. I own a chain of repair garages across the state. They're profitable, but impersonal. I need someone to help bring heart into them. Someone who understands the people we're trying to serve. Full-time position. Benefits. Housing support for single parents. The works." James blinked, unable to speak. "You think you just bought me a coffee," she said, voice soft now. "But you gave me a reason not to give up. I want to give you a reason to believe that people still see you, too." The rain had stopped by the time he stepped out of the building. Sunlight broke through scattered clouds, warming the wet pavement. He held the envelope tightly, his chest rising with something unfamiliar. Hope. But even as he walked away, something tugged at him. Who really was Evelyn Royce? And why did he feel like his life had just changed forever without even knowing what came next? James stared at the envelope all night. After Lily had fallen asleep, curled in a blanket with her rabbit and a school book still open beside her, James sat at the kitchen table under the soft flicker of the old light bulb. The manila envelope stared back at him like a dare. Inside were documents he barely knew how to read. Offer letters, benefits descriptions, a corporate welcome sheet with the Royce Foundation logo at the top. His hands felt too dirty for it. He was a man who worked under cars, not someone who wore ties to meetings or shook hands in boardrooms. What was she thinking? Why him? He opened the fridge and found it nearly empty. Just a few eggs, half a carton of milk, and the leftover macaroni Lily had said she was saving for tomorrow. James sighed. Maybe it wasn't about understanding. Maybe it was just accepting the unexpected. The next morning, he dressed differently. Not to impress anyone, he didn't have the wardrobe for that, but because he wanted to feel like something had changed, and something had. He dropped Lily off at school and walked instead of taking the bus. Arriving at the Royce Auto Center by 9, he stood in front of the building longer than necessary. It was sleek, modern, with large windows that let in light, and made the garage look less like a workplace and more like a showroom. When he stepped inside, the scent of oil and rubber was still there, but cleaner, newer. Even the floors shined. "Mr. Carter?" A voice called out. A woman in a maroon pantsuit stepped forward with a clipboard. "Welcome, Ms. Royce said to expect you." He blinked. "You mean she doesn't work here?" The woman smiled politely. "She owns it. She rarely visits in person." Those words hit differently. She rarely visits. But she had created a job just for him. His tour was short. The facilities were top-notch. The crew was professional, but casual. He was introduced as the new lead technician, a title that felt far too big for a man who had just patched his only pair of work boots. The night before, his first week passed in a blur. The work wasn't hard, it was familiar, but everything around it felt surreal. A company car, a locker with his name on it, a break room with actual fresh fruit, and a coffee machine that didn't require quarters. And then there was the housing support. He hadn't even asked. He wouldn't have. Yet one day, he received a message from Evelyn. "Check your mailbox. Consider it a beginning." Inside was a housing voucher. A 2-bedroom duplex just 5 blocks from Lily's school. Affordable, safe, and clean. He stood in that empty duplex the first evening, the keys dangling from his fingers, wondering how a $4.15 cup of caramel latte had turned into a life reset. But the strangest part wasn't the job or the home. It was her. Evelyn kept showing up, but not physically. She sent messages, emails, voice notes. She asked about his day, about Lily's favorite books, about what he liked in his coffee. She never mentioned her own problems, not once. But James knew there was more beneath the surface. One evening, after his shift ended, he got a message that simply read, "Do you believe in second chances?" He stared at it. Something inside him ached, not because of the question, but because he wasn't sure he ever thought he'd get one. He typed back, "I didn't, but maybe I'm learning how." No reply came. The next weekend, James took Lily to the local park. The sun had finally broken through after days of rain. She ran ahead, her laughter chasing the pigeons while he sat on a bench, sipping from a paper cup. A sleek black car pulled up by the curb. He didn't recognize it at first. Too polished, too expensive for his world. But when the back window rolled down, he saw her, Evelyn. No makeup, no blazer, just a sweatshirt, her hair in a simple ponytail. She stepped out and walked over slowly, her eyes scanning the park until they found Lily. "She looks like you," Evelyn said quietly. "People say she looks like her mom," James replied. His voice dropped, softer. "She died 5 years ago." Evelyn looked at him, her expression unreadable. "I'm sorry, we manage," he said. "Some days better than others." They stood there in silence for a long moment. "I wasn't supposed to be in Portland," she said. "The day you saw me, I was supposed to be in New York, signing a deal to sell half my companies. Walk away, disappear." James turned toward her. "Then why were you here?" "Because I didn't know who I was anymore. I booked a last-minute ticket to nowhere. I landed here. I thought, if I sit still long enough, maybe no one will find me. Maybe the pain won't follow." He didn't know what to say. So he said the only thing he meant, "You didn't look invisible to me." Evelyn looked at him, then really looked. Not as the mechanic who fixed bolts. Not as the single dad with tired eyes. But as the man who had seen her when she needed it most. "I think you reminded me that people don't always want something," she said. "Sometimes they just want to care." He nodded once. "And sometimes people like you don't always want to run." Her lips curled slightly. A half smile, half truth. "Maybe," she whispered. "But what if I told you I'm not done building something? What if I told you this us was just the beginning of something I never expected?" James didn't answer. But deep inside, something shifted. Because he realized this wasn't just a job. It wasn't charity. And it wasn't just kindness returned. It was something bigger. And for the first time in a very long time, he let himself believe he wasn't going back to the life he knew. He was stepping into one he never imagined. The night air was different out here, quieter. It didn't hum with traffic or sirens or the distant chatter of apartment neighbors arguing through walls. It was still, like the world was holding its breath. James stepped out onto the porch of the new duplex, coffee mug in hand. Inside, Lily was asleep, her school project spread out over the dining table, glitter, paper, and cut-up cereal boxes. She had insisted on doing it all by herself for once. It was hard not to smile. He took a sip. The coffee was lukewarm, but he didn't care. What mattered was the silence, not the hollow kind that used to keep him awake at night, but the peaceful kind, the kind that meant safety, rest, the kind he'd almost forgotten how to trust. Then his phone buzzed. One message. Evelyn, can you come by the estate tomorrow? I'd like to show you something. Bring Lily if you'd like, no pressure. He stared at the screen for a long while before typing just 2 words. James, will come. The Royce estate was like something out of a painting. Massive wrought iron gates, gardens that looked professionally sculpted, a stone fountain that sang water into silence. James had seen buildings like this in magazines, never in person, and certainly never as a guest. Lily clung to his hand, wide-eyed. Dad, she whispered, are we allowed to be here? We were invited, he said, adjusting the collar of his only button-down shirt. She said, come as we are still. As they walked the curved stone path, past trimmed hedges and rose arches, James felt out of place. Not because of how they looked, but because this wasn't his world. Not yet. Evelyn met them near the back garden. To his surprise, she was wearing jeans and sneakers. Her hair tied up messily, paint on her fingers. Real, human, you made it. She said with a smile, Lily, I hope you like fish. We have a koi pond. Lily took off with the kind of fearless joy only children possess. James followed Evelyn at a slower pace. The silence between them was comfortable now, like a book. Both had been reading from the same page. They sat near the greenhouse, where vines crawled across the glass walls like veins over skin. This is something else, James said. You really live here, most of the time, she replied. The space is beautiful, but it can feel empty. He nodded. I'd probably lose my car keys every morning. She laughed, soft and genuine. I've done that more times than I'll admit. Then came the shift. Her tone lowered. James, she said, can I ask you something personal? He looked at her. Sure. Do you ever feel like you're living a life that doesn't quite feel yours? He paused, unsure how to answer. Sometimes. He admitted, like I'm just borrowing time, making it through the day. Not sure if it's building toward anything. But then Lily smiles or says something weird and beautiful. And it's like maybe that's the whole point. Evelyn looked away for a moment, blinking hard. My father was a mechanic, she said quietly. Single dad. I was 5 when my mother died. We didn't have much, but we had breakfast together every morning before he went to the shop. I watched him give away meals to other workers, fix cars for free if someone couldn't afford it. He used to say, no one ever goes broke being kind. James felt his chest tighten. When he died, she continued, I was 17. Everything I built after that, college, the companies, the investments, it was all survival. I thought success would keep me safe, but it didn't. Not really. James waited. He sensed the weight of something still unsaid. I started this estate for someone else, she said. Someone I was supposed to marry. It was going to be our future. But things change. He didn't press. But in her silence, he heard enough. This place had once meant forever, and now it was just echoes. Then she stood and motioned for him to follow. They walked through a side gate, down a sloped path to a small building near the edge of the property. This, she said, unlocking the door, is what I wanted to show you. The inside was dusty. Old shelves lined the walls, workbenches, scattered with tools. A white sheet covered a vintage car in the center. It smelled like engine grease and something older memories. My dad's garage, she said. I had it moved here, every tool, every bolt. Even the scent of his cologne still lingers in the air. I never let anyone in here before. James stepped in slowly, as if crossing into sacred ground. I'm starting something, she said. A foundation for single parents, training programs, housing, school scholarships, and I want you to help lead it." He turned to her, stunned. "What? Not just because of what you did that day," she said, "but because you're living it. You know, the struggle, the sacrifice, the hope. I don't need a corporate suit. I need a heart that understands." His throat tightened. He had changed spark plugs his whole life. Now someone was asking him to change lives. "I'm no expert," he said. "Exactly," she replied. "That's why you're perfect." Outside, Lily called out, laughing by the pond. James looked back at the old garage, the rusted drawers, the silent tools, and the ghost of a man who once said kindness was never wasted. Then he looked at Evelyn, this woman who had everything, and somehow still wanted to give more. His voice cracked slightly. "What do you need me to do?" She smiled. "Help me build something that outlives both of us." And for the first time, James didn't just feel seen, he felt chosen. And that, he realized, was more powerful than any job, any paycheck, any promotion. He had stepped into someone else's world and found his place within it. And the world was about to change because of it. James never imagined his life would include words like boardroom, initiative rollout, or media strategy. But 3 months after stepping into Evelyn Royce's old garage, he stood at the head of a glass-walled conference room, staring at 12 strangers in tailored suits, all waiting for him to speak. He swallowed. "I'm not a businessman," he began. "I'm just a dad who couldn't afford a new jacket last winter. But I know what it feels like to fall behind on rent, to skip meals so your kid can eat. And that's why we're doing this, not because we have the funds, because we have to." There was silence at first. Then, slow nods, a few scribbled notes. A woman at the end of the table whispered something to her colleague. James clenched his fists under the table, hiding the nerves. He had never worn a watch that cost more than $20. These people probably spent more on breakfast than he did in a week. But still, they listened. After the meeting, Evelyn walked with him down the marble hallways, heels clicking like clockwork beside his worn sneakers. "You did well," she said softly. "I think I sweated through my shirt," James muttered. "They don't need polish," she said. "They need truth. And you're the only one in that room who can speak it." That night, back at the duplex, James found Lily asleep on the couch, a half-eaten slice of pizza on her plate, and her science book open across her chest. He knelt beside her, brushed a lock of hair from her forehead, and exhaled slowly. His world had changed, completely, but it still felt like his. He didn't know it yet, but everything was about to be tested. The first blow came in the form of a newspaper article. "The Royce Redemption. Single father now leads Royce family initiative." It went viral. James' photo, taken without his permission, was on the front page of the city's most read publication. Within hours, reporters camped outside the garage. Camera crews staked out his street. They wanted quotes, reactions, a soundbite about how a single dad captured the heart of Portland's most powerful woman. But that wasn't the part that rattled James. It was the comments. "So that's her new project. Is she turning him into a charity case or a boyfriend? But this guy doesn't last 2 months." He didn't know who leaked the story, but the attention brought scrutiny on him, on Lily, and most of all, on Evelyn. She called that night. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice frayed at the edges. "I didn't approve that release." "I believe you," he said, though his stomach was knotted. "We'll manage it," she promised. "We just have to stay ahead of it." "Evelyn," he asked quietly, "is there something you haven't told me?" There was a pause, longer than it should have been. "Yes," she finally said, "but not tonight." The next few weeks moved like a storm behind glass, loud, fast, and out of reach. James attended leadership classes. He helped build out the curriculum for single-parent job training. He worked with local city officials to secure permits for the new community auto center, one that would double as a trade school. And he saw Evelyn nearly every day. They talked more openly now, laughed more easily, shared meals that felt less like business and more like home. But something lingered, an invisible wall. She would sometimes fall silent mid-sentence, then change the subject. Once, James walked into her office and found her staring at an old photograph. 3 people, one of them a young Evelyn. When he asked who it was, she said simply. A ghost, and tucked it away. He didn't press, but he didn't forget. Then came the gala, a charity event hosted at Portland's City Museum. Media, donors, public officials all gathered to celebrate the official launch of the Royce Foundation's Future Roots initiative. Evelyn asked James to speak. He wore a borrowed suit. Lily picked his tie. And when he stepped onto that stage, under the soft glow of chandeliers, he didn't talk about statistics or funding. He talked about holding Lily's hand during thunderstorms, about fixing brakes at midnight so he could afford her birthday cake, about how one warm cup of coffee changed his life not because of the drink, but because someone saw him when he didn't expect it. He ended his speech with a single line. Sometimes, the people who need the most help are the ones who pretend they're fine because they've never had anyone care long enough to ask. The applause was real. Even Evelyn, seated front row in a silver dress that shimmered like moonlight, had tears in her eyes. After the speech, they met on the rooftop of the museum. The city lights stretched out below them, a field of glittering stars in concrete form. "You were incredible," she said. "I just told the truth." She stepped closer. The air between them changed, not tense electric, like something had been trying to happen for a long time. And now it was finally arriving. "I've never trusted anyone like this," she said. "Not since—" She stopped. "Since who?" James asked gently. Her face darkened. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Since the man who tried to destroy me." Then she looked at him, eyes wide and vulnerable. "There's something I've never told anyone, not even my lawyers. If I tell you, it could change how you see me. Try me." James said. She reached into her purse, pulled out a worn envelope, and pressed it into his hand. "Read it when you're alone. And whatever happens, just remember that morning in the coffee shop." Before he could ask more, she turned and walked away. James looked down at the envelope. It was addressed to her, but the return address was someone he recognized, not from his life but from a headline. A man who had once run an empire beside her. A man who vanished after a federal investigation. And the man who might just be the reason she ever walked into that cafe, crying, alone. James tucked the envelope into his jacket, heart pounding. He didn't know what he'd find inside, but he knew this story was far from over, and the truth was coming for both of them. James sat alone in the kitchen, the envelope resting on the table like a loaded gun. The silence of the house pressed in around him. Outside, the rain tapped, steadily against the window, as if echoing the rhythm of his pulse. He glanced at the clock. Lily was already asleep, curled in bed, unaware that her father's hands were trembling not from fear of a storm, but from the weight of truth unopened. He peeled the envelope open slowly, careful not to tear it. Inside was a single handwritten letter. The ink was faded in places, smudged by fingers that had likely gripped it too hard. The handwriting was elegant, careful. "Dear Evelyn, I know I am the last person you ever want to hear from again. I deserve that. I deserve worse. I ruined everything we built, not just the companies, not just the name. I broke your trust. But you need to know I never stopped loving you. I left because the wolves were closing in, and I refused to let them touch you. All the charges, I took them because I couldn't stand the thought of your name being dragged through the dirt. Not after what we shared, not after what you gave me." James's heart froze. "But you were right to walk away. You were right to cut ties. I made choices. I destroyed lives, and I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope that when you rebuild, you do it stronger. Without people like me, no signature. Just initials. D.R. James leaned back in his chair, eyes burning. He remembered the headlines now. Derek Rilland, once Evelyn's fiancé, her business partner, her anchor, indicted on wire fraud, insider trading, money laundering. He vanished before sentencing. No one had seen him since. Until now. James folded the letter and exhaled slowly. This was the man who had broken her, the ghost behind her quiet strength. And she had carried this letter for years, unread, or reread every night. He couldn't know. But now, she had given it to him. The next morning, he didn't go to work. He walked straight to the estate. Evelyn was in the greenhouse, kneeling beside a bed of wild jasmine. Sunlight filtered through the glass, casting patterns across her face. She looked up when she saw him, but she didn't smile. "You read it," she said, that double quotes, "yeah." She stood and brushed her hands against her jeans. "Go ahead. Say it. He didn't deserve your love," James said simply. "But you gave it anyway. And then you walked away. That's what matters." Her eyes glistened. "Why did you carry it so long?" he asked gently. "Because for a long time, I thought it was all I had left of who I used to be," she whispered. "And then you happened." She stepped forward, slow but steady. "James, I never planned to be saved. I never thought anyone would see past the armor. But the day you handed me that coffee, you weren't trying to fix me. You just saw me." His voice cracked. "I wasn't trying to do anything except get to work on time." They both laughed softly, fragile, warm laughter full of pain and healing. Evelyn reached into her back pocket and handed him a folded paper. "What's this?" he asked. "Ownership," she said, "of the new auto center, not just the training facility, the business, the building, everything. It's yours now, completely." James took a step back, stunned. What? You built it," she said. "I just gave you a roof. You gave it purpose, and it's time it had your name on the front." His hands shook as he opened the deed. His name. His name. He couldn't speak. Evelyn took his silence as answer. "James," she said, "this isn't charity. This is me letting go of the past, of guilt, and maybe opening space for something new." Then she looked toward the koi pond, where Lily now ran barefoot across the grass, laughter echoing between trees. "You gave me a reason to believe in something again," she said. "You and Lily." He looked at her, really looked, not as the billionaire, not as the woman in the cafe, not even as the one who had been hurt so deeply by someone else. He saw her as she was, as she chose to be. "So what now?" he asked softly. "Whatever we make of it," she said. And then, for the first time, she reached for his hand, not as a gesture of gratitude, but something braver. Partnership. 1 year later, James stood under a new sign. Carter and Royce Community Garage and Trade School Estate. 1 cup of kindness. He wore a black button-down, grease still under his fingernails. Reporters came again, but this time, he smiled for the cameras. Because the spotlight wasn't about scandal, it was about what they built. The foundation now served hundreds of single parents across Oregon. Free child care, job training, housing assistance, and hope. And James, he was a mechanic, a teacher, a leader, a father, and maybe, just maybe, something more. Every Sunday morning, without fail, he picked up 2 cups of coffee, 1 black, 1 caramel latte, and walked into the same cafe where it all began. Evelyn would already be there, waiting, smiling, and sometimes, at the far end of the cafe, someone new sat alone, crying quietly, unsure of the next step, and James would step forward, coffee in hand, and say, "On a rainy day like this, everyone deserves a warm cup." Because kindness wasn't something you gave to get anything back. It was a spark, and sometimes, that spark lit a fire big enough to change the whole world. James had never thought about legacy before. For most of his life, his only plan had been survival, day to day, shift to shift, paycheck to paycheck. But now, walking through the new wings of Carter and Royce Community Garage and Trade School, he found himself dreaming in decades. The sound of power tools echoed from one bay in another room, to teenage mothers practice tire rotation while toddlers played nearby under the care of volunteers. There was laughter, music, motion, not just learning but healing. This wasn't a business. It was a second chance factory, and James was the one holding the blueprint. He moved through the garage like a conductor, greeting trainees, offering quiet encouragement. But as he approached the community office, he noticed something strange. The door was ajar, and inside, Evelyn was sitting alone at the round table, staring at an old photograph. He knocked lightly. "You okay?" She looked up quickly, blinking. "Oh, I didn't hear you. Everything all right?" Evelyn hesitated, then smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Just lost in memories." He stepped inside. "That the same photo you kept hidden in your office?" "Yes," she said softly. "But I think it's time you knew everything." She slid the photo across the table. 3 people. Evelyn, barely in her 20s, standing between 2 men. One was clearly Derek Rilland, her former finance acute. But the other man, James's stomach flipped. He'd seen that face before. Not in real life, but in a framed photo that used to hang in the front office of the old garage, where he worked part-time a decade ago. His name was Vincent Albright. Evelyn said, "He was my father's best friend. And he was also the man who betrayed both me and Derek." James frowned. "I thought Derek was the one who embezzled everything." "He was," she said, "but not alone." Evelyn's voice dropped. "Vincent convinced Derek to funnel foundation funds into offshore accounts. It was supposed to be temporary, a way to grow our capital before the feds could even blink. But I found out, and when I confronted them, Derek confessed. Vincent vanished." "Vanished?" James asked, stunned. "Vanished with nearly $40 million of my father's legacy." Silence, thick, paralyzing. "I couldn't prove Vincent's involvement at the time," Evelyn continued. "All the evidence pointed to Derek, and Derek, guilty or not, took the fall. Maybe out of guilt, maybe out of fear. I'll never know." James sat slowly. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because 2 nights ago," she said. Reaching into her phone, "I received this." She turned the screen toward him. It was a security camera photo, grainy but clear. Vincent Albright, older, heavier, but unmistakable, standing outside the Carter and Royce Training Center, watching. "Waiting. He's here," James whispered. "He's back," Evelyn said, her voice trembling. "And I don't know why." The next few days passed in quiet chaos. James increased security at the center, changed passwords, moved sensitive documents into cloud storage. They alerted city officials, froze large donations, and reviewed all financial transactions with a forensic accountant. But Vincent didn't return. He disappeared again, like smoke. Still, the damage was already done. Rumors began to surface, online blogs whispering that maybe Royce didn't lose everything the first time. Maybe she helped hide it. Anonymous emails sent to local journalists accused Evelyn of covering up her real involvement in the fraud. One email even claimed James was a planted figurehead to clean up her image. The pressure mounted. James tried to stay calm, tried to keep the foundation running smoothly. But in quiet moments, fear crept in. Not just fear of losing the garage, but something deeper. Was he enough to protect what they'd built? To protect her? Evelyn, meanwhile, was unraveling. Not publicly. She wore her calm like a silk mask, but James could see the cracks. In the way she stared too long at nothing. In the way she stopped drinking her coffee halfway. In the way her hands trembled when she thought no one was watching. Then came the letter. Delivered to Evelyn's estate gate. Handwritten. "I want what was promised. One last meeting. Just you, no cops. Midnight. 9, or this whole fantasy ends." Vyamis found her standing in the kitchen, the letter gripped in her hand like a knife. She didn't flinch when he entered, didn't even look up. "He wants to end it," she said. "Or destroy it." "You're not going," James said immediately. "You can't." "I have to." "No, you don't. We can go to the police. Bring in security. Fight this together." "You don't understand," she snapped, her voice sharp with something that wasn't anger but fear. "Vincent knows things that never made it into the official reports. If he leaks them, the foundation will fall. Your shop, our trainees, Lily's scholarship fund, everything." She was pacing now, frantic. "This isn't just about me anymore, James. It's about all of them." James stepped forward and gently took her arms. "Then let me go with you." "No," she whispered. "You can't be seen. If he thinks I brought backup, he'll disappear again. And this time, he'll burn it all behind him." Silence fell between them. "If this goes wrong," James began. "It won't," she said. "But if it does, then know that meeting you was the only real thing that's happened to me. In the last 10 years, she whispered. He looked at her like it might be the last time. "Come back. Promise me." She didn't speak, just leaned in and kissed his cheek. Then she was gone. The clock struck 12:02 when Evelyn arrived at Dock 9. The harbor was empty. Wind swept through the metal crates, and the smell of salt and rust clung to the air. She stood in the shadows beneath a flickering floodlight, every step echoing like a question she wasn't ready to ask. "You came," said a voice from behind a cargo container. Vincent stepped out, older, colder, but smiling. You always were predictable. Evelyn stayed silent. You built quite the empire. He said, you and the mechanic. What do you want? My share. She frowned. You stole your share. He shrugged. You're still here, so clearly. I didn't take enough. He pulled a flash drive from his pocket and waved it. This contains everything. Your tax records, your personal offshore account, the one your father set up for emergencies. Want to guess how the world will react when they see what you never reported? My father's money had nothing to do with you. Maybe, Vincent said, but the world doesn't care. Evelyn's voice dropped to a whisper. What do you want for it? He smiled slowly. Walk away, give it all up, shut it down, disappear, and I'll vanish too for a moment. She said nothing. Then, without breaking eye contact, she reached into her coat and pulled out a phone. Vincent blinked. What, we're not alone, she said softly. And from behind a stack of crates, James stepped out, holding up a body cam and a live feed. Say hi to the Oregon State Attorney's office, he said. They've been listening since 11:45. Vincent lunged for the flash drive, but officers closed in from every angle, guns drawn. In under 30 seconds, he was in cuffs. The next morning, Portland woke up to headlines that didn't whisper but shouted. Royce clears name in undercover sting with new partner. Foundation scandal ends with arrest, not downfall. And at the center of it all was James, holding Lily in one arm and Evelyn's hand in the other. In a press conference, Evelyn stood before the cameras and said, I built walls after what happened years ago. And James, Carter didn't break them down. He waited outside with coffee until I was ready to open the door. Laughter, tears, applause. And through it all, James stood quietly, not as a charity case, not as a figurehead, but as a man who had once bought a stranger a caramel latte on a rainy Tuesday, and in doing so, changed his world, and hers. Forever. The days after Vincent Albright's arrest blurred into a whirlwind of cameras, headlines, interviews, and flashing lights, but underneath the noise, something sacred was happening. The storm had passed, and yet, James knew the real work was just beginning. Evelyn's reputation had been salvaged. Yes, the foundation had survived the scandal. Vincent had confessed everything in custody, his involvement in the embezzlement, his manipulation of Derek Rilland, and the plan to frame Evelyn once more. But damage had still been done. Donors pulled out quietly. To board members resigned without comment. Media pundits still speculated that maybe she'd known more than she admitted, because the truth didn't sell nearly as well as doubt. And it all started to wear on Evelyn. She didn't say it, not at first, but James noticed in the way she stood too long at windows, the way she stared at emails without typing a word, the way she clutched her father's old watch in her palm like it was an anchor. One night, as they sat beside each other on the porch of her estate, James finally asked, Are you okay? She hesitated. I'm tired, James. He reached for her hand. You're allowed to be. I just keep wondering, she whispered. How long until someone else tries to tear it all down again? He looked at her, heart full of fire. Let them try. But Evelyn didn't smile. Instead, she turned toward him slowly. James, what if we walked away? Just the two of us. Sell the company garage. Hand over the foundation to someone else. Disappear. Just live. The thought pierced his chest like ice and fire all at once. He hadn't expected it. Not from her. Do you want that? He asked. I don't know, she said. I want peace. And every time I get close, someone comes for it. James was silent. He understood. But something inside him, something planted that rainy morning, with 2 cups of coffee, told him peace wasn't something you found by hiding. You built it, brick by brick, day by day. The next week, James returned to the auto training center with renewed focus. The building was buzzing again. Media attention had faded. New recruits were signing up. There was life in the halls again, but something was off. Numbers weren't adding up. James noticed it first in the inventory logs. Parts were disappearing. Donations were being processed twice. Grant money was allocated to projects that didn't exist. At first, he thought it was clerical error, until he checked the security footage. And what he saw chilled him. Bradley, the operations manager, the same man who'd been hired to oversee logistics during the expansion, the man who smiled at every board meeting, who brought donuts to staff breakfasts, who once said James was the best thing to happen to the foundation. He was moving boxes at night, slipping funds into dummy accounts. Another betrayal. James didn't confront him, not yet. He needed proof. He stayed up all night auditing files, comparing invoices, building a case. And in the middle of that storm, Evelyn walked into his office. "You're still here?" she asked. He looked up, eyes tired, heart heavier than he wanted to admit. "We've been hit again." Her face dropped. "Who?" He slid the security footage across the table. She gasped. "Bradley." "Yeah. Looks like Vincent wasn't the only ghost we didn't see coming." She sank into a chair. "How much?" "Close to 600,000. Most of it foundation. Reserves, God," she whispered, voice cracking. "How did we miss this?" James hesitated, then said what he didn't want to say. "Maybe because we trusted him, just like you trusted Derek, just like you trusted Vincent." The words hung in the air like poison. Evelyn stood slowly, her jaw tight. "Is that how you see me?" "No," James said quickly, standing. "That's not what I meant. I can't protect this place if people keep getting in through the cracks. And I can't run it if I'm too scared to trust anyone," she snapped. They stared at each other, to people who had risen from nothing, now terrified they might lose everything again. "Finally," she whispered, "maybe I'm not the person to lead this anymore." He stepped toward her. "Then who is?" "You." James's breath caught. "Me." "Yes," she said. "You see things I don't. You hear things I miss. You don't just run the garage, you anchor it." "I'm a mechanic, Evelyn, and I'm the daughter of one," she said. "And I've never seen someone hold a legacy tighter than you do." Double quotes, silence. Then James said, "You can't leave." "I'm not leaving," she replied. "But maybe I need to step back, and maybe you need to step forward." And just like that, another turning point. 2 weeks later, James Carter was officially named the executive director of the Royce Found. The ceremony was small, private, just staff and families. Lily stood at the front, holding a bouquet. Evelyn gave a speech, her voice steady but soft. "Years ago," she said, "I stood in this city ready to vanish. Instead, I was handed a cup of coffee by a man who didn't know my name and didn't ask for anything in return. And in that moment, he changed the course of my life." James stepped up to the mic, still unsure if he belonged there but holding the weight with pride. "I didn't think I was saving anybody that day," he said. "I just saw someone hurting, and now I want to make sure no one ever hurts alone again." The applause was quiet but thunderous in meaning. Evelyn reached for his hand as they stepped off the stage. "You didn't just lead us through a storm," she said. "You became the lighthouse." He squeezed her fingers. "Only because you lit the match." 1 month later, a new wing was added to the Auto Center. The Evelyn Royce Mentorship Institute, dedicated to teaching women and young girls skills in finance, leadership, and engineering. Evelyn now visited weekly instead of daily, focusing on advocacy, law reform, and mentorship from behind the scenes. And James, he led from the front. Not just a face, not just a mechanic, a man who had earned every scar and every soul he helped lift with him. And every Sunday morning, he still stopped by that little coffee shop. To drinks. 1 black. 1 caramel latte. And just in case someone new sat in the corner with tears in their eyes, he always ordered a third. The city had started whispering again, not with scandal, not with gossip, but with something more unsettling. Doubt. It began subtly. A news piece titled, "Is the Royce Foundation Growing Too Fast?" followed by another headline, "From Wrench to Wealth, Does James Carter Have the Experience to Lead a Movement?" And then, the worst one yet, "Sources Say Royce May Step Away for Good, Insiders Fear Collapse." James read it at dawn, seated alone in the corner booth of the cafe where it all began. The same booth where Evelyn had cried once. Now it was his shoulders that carried the weight. Outside, the world moved fast. Students walked to school. Buses roared past intersections. Delivery vans beeped in reverse. But inside, the clock ticked slow, and every second felt louder than the one before. He sipped his black coffee. It was cold, just like the stares he'd been getting lately. The new board was tense. Since taking the role of executive director, James had moved with heart and urgency. Enrollment tripled. 5 new programs launched. A vocational program in Medford, a mobile training unit, a scholarship pipeline with Portland Tech. And that was the problem. Money was moving fast. Too fast for comfort. "You're expanding too quickly," said one board member during a private meeting. "The infrastructure can't support this pace." "Then we strengthen the infrastructure," James said. "Jaw tight." "And if we can't?" another asked. "What if this collapses under its own weight? We didn't build this to play." "It's safe," James snapped. "We built this because the system was leaving people behind. And if we don't grow, we're just decorating a cage." They didn't clap. They didn't nod. They simply looked at him like he was still just the guy who changed tires. Meanwhile, Evelyn had gone quiet. Not absent, but quieter than usual. She replied to texts, attended her mentorship group, smiled during interviews. But she didn't linger anymore. Didn't walk the halls with him. Didn't look at him quite the same. James noticed, and late one Friday night, he found her in the old greenhouse, watering plants in silence. "You okay?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. "Do you remember what you told me that night on the rooftop?" she said. "Which part?" "That kindness doesn't fix the past, it builds the future." He nodded. "James, what if I told you the past isn't finished with me yet?" His heart sank. "What are you saying?" She set down the watering can and turned to him. "I got a letter from Derek." James froze. "He's been out for 2 months, early release, federal cooperation. He's in Seattle now, says he wants to meet." "Why?" James asked, voice low. "He didn't say." She whispered. "But he said he still has something. Mine." The air changed. James's mind spun. "You're not going to see him, right?" "I don't know, Evelyn, you don't get it," she snapped. "He knew me before all of this. Before the money, before the mansion, before the headlines. There's a part of me still tied to that girl, the one who believed in him." James stepped closer. "He buried you." "I buried me, James," she said, "when I gave up on ever being more than the scars he left behind. You're not that woman anymore." He said, "Aren't I?" Her voice cracked. "Because sometimes I look in the mirror and I still see her. And I think, what if everything I've built is still rooted in fear?" James's hands clenched at his sides. "Then burn the roots, Evelyn. Don't go backward. To find answers that only live in the future." But she was already looking away, and he knew she'd made up her mind. The next day, she was gone. No calls, no texts. James found a note on his desk. "I have to close this chapter for myself. Not for you. Not for the foundation. For me." He read it 3 times, then crumpled it in his fist. For the first time in years, he didn't feel strong. He felt replaceable. Days passed. The garage ran. The classes continued. The media stayed quiet. But James couldn't. He couldn't sleep, couldn't smile, couldn't look at Lily without wondering if someday she'd walk away to chase closure in the arms of a ghost. Then, at midnight, his phone buzzed. "Unknown number," he lied. "I'm coming home. Wait for me." And attached a photo, not of Derek, but of Evelyn standing beside a vault with her father's name engraved in gold. And inside, stacks of documents. And a tape. A physical tape, labeled simply, "For Evelyn, in case of betrayal." She returned the next morning. No fanfare, no press, just her, walking up the stone steps of the foundation, like she never left. James met her at the door. She looked different, not broken, not triumphant. Just free. "I listened to it," she said. He waited. "It was my father." She whispered. He knew. He knew Derek and Vincent were planning something. He left a message in case they ever succeeded. And in that tape, he didn't ask me to fight. What did he ask? To forgive myself. James felt his heart slow. Evelyn reached into her coat and pulled out a small metal key. "What's that?" he asked. His original will. It was never filed. The vault held it, and in it, he left the original garage. "Not to me." James blinked. "Then who?" "To you." His breath caught. "He wrote your name in that document 12 years ago. He met you once, James. Years before, when you fixed his truck for free after a storm. Said he never forgot you." James staggered back, overwhelmed. "Why now?" he asked. "Because we were always meant to find each other," she said. Not as rescuer and rescued. Not as boss and worker. Not even as partners. Then what? As legacy, she whispered. His last act wasn't building an empire. It was making sure it ended in the right hands. Tears spilled down James's cheeks. And Evelyn stepped closer. So now, she said softly, I ask you something my father never got to ask. Will you build the rest of this life with me? He couldn't speak. He just nodded. Because love wasn't always grand gestures. Sometimes it was holding hands in silence, with everything on the line, and choosing to stay. Every time. Especially when the world tried to pull you back into the dark. But one chapter still remained, because something in that tape hinted at a truth even Evelyn didn't yet understand. A truth sealed inside a second envelope, unopened. And labeled with her mother's name. The envelope had been sitting on Evelyn's nightstand for 3 days. Untouched. It was smaller than the others, aged, yellowed at the corners, sealed with a faded red wax emblem that bore a single, hand-drawn symbol. An orchid, her mother's favorite flower. Evelyn had found it tucked in the back of the vault, behind tax documents and legal files, slipped inside the lining of her father's old briefcase. On the front, written in her mother's delicate handwriting, were 6 words, for Evelyn when you're finally ready. She wasn't ready. Not then. Not until now. The foundation was stable again. The scandal had passed. The community trusted them, and James, he had stayed through it all. But still, there was a quiet ache she hadn't yet named, something that told her there was one more truth she needed to face before she could finally breathe freely. So tonight, under a violet sky, rain misting against the windows of the greenhouse, she opened it, and everything she thought she knew changed. My sweet Evelyn, the letter began, by the time you read this, you'll have already faced more than I could prepare you for. But I hope you'll also have found something I never had the courage to hold on to: real love, real peace, and a reason to stay. There's something I need to confess. Evelyn's hands trembled. You weren't just born into legacy. You were born out of choice. I wasn't supposed to have you, not by the doctors, not by the laws of probability, not by my parents. But your father and I, we tried anyway. And we made you. But not just together. We made you with help. Evelyn paused. What did that mean? 25 years ago, we worked with a researcher, a geneticist. We were part of a private trial for a fertility treatment, experimental, funded quietly through our medical foundation. And the truth is, your biological father might not be the man who raised you. The room spun. Your father knew, we both did, but it never mattered to him. He loved you so fully that blood never came between you. But there is one man, one donor who may still be alive, and he was not a stranger. Evelyn's pulse roared in her ears. His name was William Carter. Her breath caught. No, he was a young mechanic, brilliant mind. He didn't have degrees, but he had instinct. We chose him because he reminded us of the world we came from. Kind, humble, strong. No. And when I saw the photo of you and James together, I saw him, not your father, him. And I knew blood or not, fate had a funny way of bringing things full circle. Evelyn dropped the letter. She was shaking. William Carter. James, single quotes, S father. It was to 14 a.m. when James opened the door, groggy and confused. Evelyn, he asked, what happened? She stood there, drenched in rain, her fingers clenched around the letter. I need to talk to you, she whispered. Now. He pulled her inside, wrapped a towel around her shoulders, guided her to the kitchen. The lights flicked on. Everything looked the same. But nothing felt the same. She slid the letter toward him. Read it. His eyes moved fast, then slowed, then froze. The words hit like thunder, like fire, like silence. William Carter. His dad. This can't be real, James said. I thought it wasn't, she whispered. But my father knew. And your name, it was in his will for a reason. He didn't just admire you. He knew who you were. I'm your— No, she said quickly. You're not my brother. I checked. We're not related, not by blood. The genetic contribution wasn't direct. My father's DNA was still used. But your father, he gave us the spark, the science, the second chance. James leaned back, stunned. Why didn't he ever tell me? Because your father didn't know, she said. He donated anonymously. Your mother must have known. But he never did. James's face folded in grief and disbelief. So you and I, we were always circling something deeper, Evelyn said. Not love born from a coffee cup. Not just trust, not just trauma. Legacy. Tears welled in her eyes. Your father gave me life, and years later you gave it back to me. They sat in silence for a long time. The rain fell harder outside. Finally, James whispered, "What do we do now? We honor them," she said. "Your father, my father, the truth." "How?" "We start a new division in the foundation," she said, "for anonymous donors, for children born from second chances, for people like us created through hope and silence." He nodded slowly. "We call it the Orchid Initiative," she said, "named after my mother." 1 year later, the Orchid Initiative opened its doors. It offered grants for women in fertility trials, support for anonymous families, and full transparency education for adopted and donor-conceived youth. It also funded genetic research and trauma therapy for children of experimental programs. James and Evelyn stood side by side during the launch. A crowd of hundreds applauded. And when a reporter asked, "How did this all begin?" James smiled. "With a cup of coffee," he said. And Evelyn added softly, "And a man who didn't ask for anything, but gave me everything." They married on a quiet hilltop the following spring. Lily walked Evelyn down the aisle. The only guests were their foundation staff, a few close friends, and a small photo tucked into Evelyn's bouquet. Her father. His father. A photo of two men who never met, and yet built a world together through their children. Epilogue. Years later, a young woman walked into that same Portland coffee shop. Her coat was soaked, her face tired. She sat by the window, hands shaking. A stranger noticed her. An older man. He ordered a caramel latte and walked it over. "Bad day?" he asked gently. She nodded. "Here," he said, placing it down. "Everyone deserves a warm cup." She looked up. "What's your name?" she asked. He smiled. "Carter," he said. And in that moment, the story began again.